an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Jane the Virgin Season 2, Episode 13, Chapter 35. In this episode, there are so many things going on, of course, but the main one that I am so happy about is that Petra just tells Raphael to fuck right off. Just beautiful. Just a moment. I loved it so much. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Claire. I was about to say Natalia. To Claire for commissioning this episode. Claire, if you're out there, I don't know if you're ever able to come to the lives, but appreciate you so much. So this episode, you guys, this is one that had, there have been a lot of developments that aren't exactly there. I don't want to call them predictable because to a degree that's the point, right? Like that's sort of what we're after with how soaps go and romance novels. There are tropes, there are things that are somewhat predictable, and that's the comfort, and that's what's fun about it. So I feel like the word predictable has a very negative connotation that I don't intend. That said, I know that what we have to do with a lot of the relationships in this show is ensure that people can't be together for any extended period of time, because the romance has to ebb and flow. We have to have the drama. We have to have the, sort of sometimes actual distance between characters for certain things to happen to justify why they wouldn't have told each other things. And I really understand that what I liked about this episode is part of those tropes, but it feels like it's not, if that makes sense. Because what I liked about this episode was the fact that, like, instead of a sort of will they, won't they thing with Xiomara and Rogelio, I won't say that the door is closed forever, because it's really not. If Rogelio wanted to just give up on having kids, it could be open again in a moment. But it feels like the point of the episode was for people to really, like, choose in a definitive way that is going to be carried out for at least the next few episodes, if not until the end of the season. And there is something about how everybody is choosing what's best for them without actually, like, making it into a guilt trip or letting themselves be guilted into staying with somebody that's not right for them, or letting the fact that they feel like lonely influence them. It's just really nice. I just really loved that for everybody this episode. You have Xiomara, who is just saying to Rogelio, I am never changing my mind, and you're waiting for me to do it. And you've just got to move on to somebody else, because it's unfair for me to know that's what you're hoping for and keep fucking around with you. And we have Jane, who chooses Michael despite there being a real Raphael in the room telling her not to. And just being like, you know what, Raphael? Kick rocks. Deal with it. And then we have Petra telling Raphael when he shows up and tries to tell her, I think I might have made a mistake. She stops him and says, what happened? And he's taken totally off guard. What do you mean? And she says, what happened with Jane? Did she reject you again? Something happened. Yeah, no. I am not a second-class citizen. And I am not going to be a fucking, like, backup plan for you. Amazing. I love this so much. My enjoyment of Petra as a person has just gone, like, I can't believe how much I am rooting for her now. It's just wild, this turnaround. And the fact that it felt like she was sort of hoping things would eventually go this way, but that she has enough self-respect to be like, no, I do love him and I do want this, but he doesn't. And so it doesn't count. There are so many people out there that would not be able to see the distinction there. And their desire for this relationship, they would let themselves believe what he was telling them, simply because this is what they wanted to happen. And I would understand doing that too. But I just love that she is able to see through his shit. And it's really funny too, because like, you know, him talking about how she's trying to get him to focus on this ad campaign. It turns out that there's this like ridiculous video that's one of the first things that pops up on Google when people search for the Marbella. And so, or Marbella. And so she's like, yeah, we've got to get out in front of this and create something of our own and just kind of get enough SEO that wipes this off the map. But he is not focused. And they're having a meeting about this, and like, it's just very clear his mind is elsewhere. You know, eventually he gets told by Jane that she is going to be with Michael. And when he is with Petra again, he is spacing out. She's really frustrated, understandably. Like, first of all, you never like to feel like people aren't hearing you when you're talking. Second of all, this is his business and she's trying to save it and he doesn't seem to care. And third of all, she has this hormonal storm going on, which is probably making her more irritable than usual, and is feeling like she's doing all the heavy lifting here on his business while she's pregnant with his kids, which granted, he didn't choose, but whatever. So she is really, really fucking annoyed. And he says, I just found out that Jane is going to get back together with Michael, and I'm just having trouble processing. So she has heard that there is like something really changing on the horizon between him and Jane in a tangible way. Jane was saying she didn't want to be with him, but she was single. She was in the pool still. She was still like vaguely a kind of threat. And now that she is declaring that she's going to be with Michael, who she was engaged to, so it is very likely this is going to be quite serious. It totally removes her from the board. And like I said, Petra, in her current state, could very easily be excused for accepting Raphael back with open arms, both because she is still in love with him and because she's about to have his children, and this would create this, like, you know, ideal nuclear family unit that she was probably wanting in the first place with him when she married him. But she doesn't, and that is badass for me. That's just so good. So, okay. We'll start from the beginning, and we see her and Michael just catching up on everything. It's really, really adorable. They don't actually like make out. They don't go in her room and have sex immediately, which I low-key was kind of expecting. It's just the two of them filling each other in on everything that has happened, because I don't remember how long it's been, but I feel like it's a year almost. And Michael insists that he wants to talk to Raphael and apologize for what happened. And Jane's like, okay, sure, but you have to let me talk to him first. And we then have her like inside, and she is with her mother and grandmother, who have already found out about this whole... She was trying to hide that Michael was here, but they're sitting at the window. They already know. We then have Rogelio coming in, and he doesn't knock, so Xiomara has to let him in. And she tells him, I just want you to keep coming in like you always did. You don't need to knock. And he says, thank you. I just wanted to be respectful. And the two of them are clearly like still into each other, but they're being pretty relaxed. It's not like the other time when they broke up and they just didn't know how to act around each other. It's just normal. And the normal is sort of what's weird. So anyway, we find out that he has what's called the Tiago event. I don't remember if he describes exactly what this is, but he says, I want to get a hashtag. Oh, it's a premiere for his movie, I guess. But he wants to get a hashtag going. What I love about Paula is she won't reveal a single secret, which is also what I hate about her. Guys, who else? Raise your hand. Show of hands here. As soon as Paula showed up, how many of you were like, this is his stalker? Like, immediately, right? I am so sorry, Rogelio, and no shade. Actually, I guess it is some shade, but I don't mean it. But, like, a girl who had worked for JLo is not going to then work for you unless she did something really wrong. Like, unless she, like, fucked up bad. In which case, you wouldn't want her. But you would probably, like, this just... It didn't jive. And the way the last episode ended and then this new person just shows up, I was just like, yeah, okay. So eventually we do get there. And the way the episode ends is genuinely like, yikes. But I don't know where we're going from there. So I'm going to jump ahead to Jane rejoining the staff of the Marbella. She's going to be waiting tables again. And she gets an update from Lena. We no longer hate busboy Ben. Turns out he was just in a bad relationship that made him cranky, which I found out after I slept with him. Anyway, now all of our hate is reserved for Vests, the world's worst boss. And apparently that's Scott's first name, but he wants to be called Mr. Archuleta, because he's the manager now. But that's apparently Lena calling him Vests, which makes sense because he does wear them, but he wears the hell out of them. You might want to shut it down, Lena, because we have a problem. I know you've been stealing liquor. So the issue here is that she was drunk at work and liquor is going missing, and understandably he is putting those two things together as one event, which even though he is being a dick, I can't even blame him for, because most of us would put those two things together as being a connected event. But it turns out, we find out that fucking Luisa, I will always have to pause before I say her name to remember it. Luisa fell off the wagon. And she has been stealing booze, which not only affects Lena, but eventually affects this other kid who winds up getting fired, which sucks. And I just really appreciated getting to see the effect that something like this has on, like, smaller staff, because this is a very real, people up the chain who do shit have to have somebody as a fall guy. And it's always going to be a person that can be easily replaced, that doesn't have any way to defend themselves. It's just, and it's not like Luisa is doing this on purpose, but she's doing it so thoughtlessly, which is part of what's like really upsetting for me about it, is that she doesn't even consider it. And even when Lena tells her later that like she is about to lose her job, Luisa has like the booze snuck back and can't confess like publicly to the fact that she took it. So that's what leads to this other kid getting canned. And it's just all like really selfish. And it's for the sake of her pride and being like worried that Raphael is going to be so disappointed in her. And I'm like, girl, I don't want to fucking heap salt into this wound, but I really feel like he's already so disappointed in you after everything. I don't know that falling off the wagon is going to do all that much to make it worse. You know, I just feel you may as well, you know. So then we have, what is her name? Susanna, the Michael's partner. I had failed to mention in the last episode the way that Rose specifically threatens her nephew, I think it is. I feel like I mentioned it really briefly, but it was actually a pretty good moment because she describes like the comforter on the bed and the poster on the wall, which all could be that they know exactly where he is and what he's doing and are watching him. Or it could be that he posted a picture of his room on social media and they just pulled it up and used it to leverage against her. Even if they did use social media, at least that still suggests that they have enough of a lead on finding him that they could harm him were they interested in doing so. So it's a real like scary moment. And eventually Susanna says to Michael, she doesn't exactly apologize. She admits to him that internal affairs assign her to him to investigate him, which he had figured out pretty much. And then she tells him, I understand now a lot better how she got to you. Like, it's difficult to understand that sort of thing, I feel like, unless somebody goes through it and feels that imminent threat. Because it's one thing to say, she threatened my family. It's another thing for them to name someone and describe the room they're in that's in your family. Like, that just feels different. And so I really do understand how it was difficult for her to really grasp the situation until she went through it. And it clearly has sort of changed her perspective on Michael. I don't want to say that she's like going to lie on his behalf or anything, but I am thinking that she is softening enough toward him that he might be able to get away with a couple things. And she would, if not help him, cover for him. But, and also she winds up like really insisting to Louisa, you have got to go to rehab and get better, because when you're done, I want to take you out. I just can't root for this relationship. I just can't do it. I just don't think Louisa should have any romantic prospects at this point. She is a mess. And I think this is the wrong approach. And I don't want anybody to be promising to go on a date with an alcoholic who is about to go into rehab when they're done, as if it's like, now you're fine. It's just, that's not how it works. And it feels really, really unhealthy to me. But I get that the show has to have something to promise us, you know, but I just want it to be known that I can't root for the relationship. I don't even remember if I got Susanna's name right at this point, because I do not care about her very much. And the like need to keep Louisa as a major part of the plot is the only thing that makes sense for having this be a thing, because otherwise it feels like every time the episode goes to Louisa, it grinds to a halt. Even when she's directly involved in stuff, it doesn't feel like it makes sense that she's there. And they're going to have to find a much better way to get her like entangled in everything. Because as of right now, just like being in love with Rose has been her number one personality trait, and being a ditz. So I need more, which I hesitate to even say because I don't actually want more. Does that make sense? Harsh, but true. So let's go to Raphael. And he is trying to show off these adorable little swim trunks that he got from Mateo that have sharks all over them. They really are very, very cute. But she immediately is like, Raphael, I need to talk to you. And she says, Michael didn't want to be around me or the baby while Rose was out there, but now she's gone and we're safe. And he starts to realize where this is going and gets this look. And she says, he still loves me and I still love him. And he says, no. I never even considered him just saying no. Like, honestly, I didn't. And when he said it, I was like, oh, like, is he allowed to do that? And she presses him and he says, come on, anyone but him. He punched me in the face in front of Mateo. I can't be mad at him for that. You were getting him fired from his job. You turned him in, which was fucked up. And you know that even though there was like a very logical reasons that you eventually point out for why you wouldn't want him around your kid, that a lot of it had to do with your feelings for Jane and wanting this guy to be sort of out of the picture. And honestly, being like, oh, it was in front of Mateo. It was an infant child. They do not remember. It doesn't matter. I understand that he got hurt in the fight. I get that. But also, you could have not lunged back at him and turned it into what it turned into. You could have tried to restrain yourself, and you weren't interested in that. So pretending that it's like all one-sided is just insincere. And she says, he wants to apologize. He's different, and you turned him in, and that makes it okay. He's a bad guy. He's bad for our family, and I want nothing to do with him. And then she does the best thing. She says, are you serious? And he genuinely seems to have no idea why she's reacting like this. And she says, Petra covered up for the fact that her mom pushed my grandmother down the stairs and I threw her a friggin' baby shower. And now you're telling me you can't have lunch with Michael? This is one of my favorite things for many reasons. First of all, it's what you would actually be thinking as the character in this moment. And y'all know I love a realistic argument. It is catnip to me. Like a good argument depicted. It's just, oh, so satisfying. It's one of my favorite. It's like, it's satisfying and also so frustrating, and it doesn't quite satisfy actually, but it feels validating somehow when you're watching it, especially if the characters are saying something that you wish they would say but often don't in these sort of circumstances. But the other thing is simply to remind the audience what Petra did, because this is something that I am as guilty of as anybody, even considering how I cover TV and books. It's so easy when you begin to like a character and they have changed to completely forget what they were like before. This has happened to me with like Sex Education. There's a character on that who really turns a corner, and yet I forgot some of the things they did in like the first and second season until a character pointed it out. Like, you did this to me. Fuck you. And I was suddenly like, oh, she did do that. I forgot. And it's really, really easy for that to happen. And for you to like kind of take the side of the person making the argument initially, because you have just clean forgot how this person was seasons ago. This also was one of my favorite things they did on Desperate Housewives at one point. There's a character whose husband is attempting to do some sort of like business deal. And it's in season like 4 or 5. And he says, like, you never support me when I want to do stuff. And he has used that argument before to great effect. So in the moment, you're sort of like, yeah, why are you like this? And then his wife says, oh my God, I can't believe that almost worked on me. I supported you when you did this. I supported you when you did this thing and burned it down. I supported you when you got us bankrupt on this. And I had totally forgotten like almost all of those things. And so it was just a complete turnaround in the conversation for me as a viewer as well. And you could see when she like cited those that he was so in his head. I think the point was that the character himself had a martyr complex and didn't remember or didn't want to remember. And anyway, you guys, I just love this moment so much. And he immediately, fine, let's have lunch. And he could barely control himself. And when he goes to lunch, he is really, really shitty. It's so, like, later on, when he and Jane are at this swim lesson, he tries to tell her, I tried. He did not try. Not even for a moment. Michael makes a good apology. We find out that Jane wrote it, which of course she did. I'm not asking you to forgive me, but I hope you can accept my apology. And Raphael can barely look at him. And finally he just says, I got it. Is there anything else you want to say? Sure. I don't like you. I don't trust you. And I don't want you anywhere near my son. Michael is trying so hard. He really is. And he says that Michael just won't go away. That he's like a cockroach that keeps coming back where he doesn't belong. Which is so gross and insulting. And like, and the idea that he doesn't belong is because Raphael has a clear picture of what he thinks his life is supposed to look like. And it's so funny that he can't see how much Petra is also this person. But sure. And Michael finally just says, you're just jealous because Jane chose me. And he says, she chose you? And I'm like, why are you saying it in this dubious tone? That's exactly what happened. Yes, she did choose you. Not you, Michael. But it's just really like the whole, like, he's trying to act like that wording is somehow melodramatic or untrue. And it's like, she was literally trying to decide between the two of you and then went with Michael. There's no other way to describe it. I feel like he's trying to make Michael seem small in that moment and like immature by just denying the reality of the situation. And when Michael says, you're jealous, she chose me, Jane looks at Michael and says, seriously? And I was not mad at Michael. I'm sorry. Raphael made no effort for this to be amicable. And I just can't blame Michael for pointing out what's obviously true. That's what's behind this whole thing. Come on now. So, all right. We then have this scene with her and Rogelio. He's going to be running some lines with Xiomara, which like ends with them falling into bed together later. But I love Jane has to tell him that she is back together with Michael. And he just like keeps it all inside, but he really loses it for a second. It's very, very cute. He's jumping on the furniture. He says, you don't say. And she says, but I don't think it's going to work out. And he says, what's holding you back? He and Raphael hate each other, and Raphael won't let go of that. And I don't want that kind of animosity around Matteo. I mean, that is so important. And he says, but so is true love, Jane. I'm sorry, but it is. And it's so rare what you and Michael have and what me and Zoe have. And he realizes like what he said and looks up at her like, fuck. And he said, I'm sorry, it does apply to us. Well, that's why we're not able to walk away from each other. And she mentions the kids issue, and he says, I don't know, perhaps she'll change her mind. She's already told him that she won't, but he's still holding on to that, which is very frustrating to hear. And I was glad that she underlines that later, and it's like, no, I'm really, really not. I am really not going to change my mind. You have got to believe and hear me. So, okay. Then we have this whole thing with, because Paula, she's there when he like goes through a drawer and finds one of his pairs of underwear has been folded like incorrectly. And it's just a giveaway that somebody was in his room messing with his stuff. So this creates a false security breach kind of feel where she is put in full control of everything about his security. And he gives it all up in the most like babe in the woods hayseed way possible. Like he has no idea. It has never even occurred to him. You've known this woman like 3 days. Maybe don't give her the passcodes to all of your security systems and tell her exactly what kind of locks you use, or, you know, like, so she manages to get in and completely like restructure everything about his home so that she can lock him in with her at the end of the episode. And that's a whole thing. I really wonder if Xiomara will notice that he is missing, because the point of the way they left it was that they should step back from each other. And I feel like Xiomara is going to think that he is honoring that and really is ending it, while she's secretly hoping he'll give up on the idea of having children. And she'll give up on the whole concept of them and then find out later he didn't want to be cut off from her, you know? So then we have this scene where Raphael is at the pool with Jane doing this swim lesson. And it turns out that there was a night nurse interview that he was supposed to do with Petra, but the swim class time got moved and he forgot to tell her. So he's here and he's just like, can they reschedule? And she says, they're here. You know what? Forget it. I'll just decide. And later on, she kind of confronts him and is like, am I going to be a second class citizen? Because I need to know. I know that you didn't choose to have these kids, but you said you would be there and I want to know if you really mean it or not. And I appreciated that she, you know, points out that he didn't want the kids. But also, I do really feel like she has a point here. You know, I understand him wanting to be there for this swim class, but I also do feel like Jane was already there. And if I were in Raphael's position, which was, for the record, standing on the edge of the pool, perfectly dry when he gets this phone call, I would have told Jane, hey, I'm sorry, the night nurse thing, I forgot, we are doing interviews. And I would go to Petra, because that was the obligation that was really like first. When the swim class got moved, the thing that was already scheduled in that time slot should take precedence. And I can't be mad at Petra for taking this a certain way. I really, really do get it. And I just think it was a mistake. He climbs down into the water and I was just sort of like, sir, come on. And I think really what's motivating him here is that he wants to be near Jane. He is just convinced that he's going to be able to say something that will change things. And yet when she brings up like, what the fuck you did, that you could barely 5 seconds keep it from like blowing up at the table, he has the fucking gall to be like, really? You want to do this here? And I'm like, dude, did you think that you were going to be able to come to this little event after what you acted like, and that it wasn't going to be the first thing that she brought up? Like, come on, dude. Get fucking for real. I love that there is one moment of unity when they get excited that Mateo is blowing bubbles in the water. It's like, you know, it's very cute. But I just have to point out, all the other mothers that are here, they don't have a father with them. They are just with their child. Raphael being here is super unnecessary. And it's just... Anyway, he has another moment with Jane trying to say it's about safety. The threat's not actually gone. And Michael has made a lot of dangerous choices because of his job. You know it's true. She reports this to Michael, and his response is, so I'll quit my job. And I really love this. Not because I want him to do it, even though you really shouldn't be a cop, Michael, because cops are bad. But what I love is that I believe he is sincere in offering to do this, but what it achieves is that it calls Raphael's bluff, because he's acting like it's just Michael's career that's the problem. And Michael, I don't know if he intended to call his bluff, if that was what he was doing, or if he was in all sincerity prepared to quit. But the effect of then Jane telling him, Michael said that he will quit his job. But that's not making it any better, is it? Because it's not about that. I love it so much. Like, honestly, I would have been fine with it if Michael hadn't offered to quit his job and Jane just said he was, to see how Raphael responded. Because at this point, Raphael is being so dishonest and so unreasonable and really basically having like a tantrum that do what you got to do to really point out to him the way that he's fucking behaving. You know, this whole thing is so frustrating because he is absolutely in the place that Luisa was, with just obsessing over Jane. So we have the scene between Xiomara and Rogelio where they wind up in bed. Jane catches Rogelio sneaking out and pretends to her mom that she didn't for a minute before calling her out. And then she finally is like, okay, look, he's holding out hope. He still thinks that maybe you'll change your mind. And that completely changes it for Xiomara. She thought, oh yeah, you know, exes have sex, then they finally move on. But it's clear that was not what Rogelio felt this was. And I really like the fact that as soon as she hears how he's interpreting it all, she's just like, I can't do that to him. I have to just call it quits, you know? So, all right. Oh my God. I forgot about when Jane finds Luisa drunk. Oh my God, Luisa, you are such a mess. She says she's going to call her sponsor. And that's when Susanna shows up and is like, oh, okay, I'll take care of her. And again, I already talked about it. We don't need to do that. So I'm trying to see what else I may have like sort of jumped over. Oh my God, you guys. I forgot, but I really like this scene. So because Xiomara and Rogelio are really taking a step back from each other, he invites Jane to go with him to this premiere instead. And she comes out in this like evening gown and she looks really pretty. And Xiomara says, just go and have fun. I'm looking forward to just relaxing and I'm going to buy some Chinese and just put on the DVR. And she decides to indulge. I don't want the gluten-free MSG-free egg rolls. I know that's my normal order. Just the regular egg rolls tonight for one. And I just have to say, you guys, I don't know that this is her only order, but all I could think when she said she would order Chinese, but then she only is like, it sounds like asking for one egg roll. I was just like, at first I'm like, oh, she's just getting the regular egg rolls because she's trying to indulge a little bit because of this breakup and comfort food and whatever. Can totally relate. But then it felt like that was all she was ordering. And I was suddenly like, yeah, this is why she looks like she looks. And this is why I look like what I look like. Her indulging in comfort food to eat away her feelings has a very different landscape to it than my version. But she is about to try and watch Downton Abbey. And this is the kind of thing that I bet would be a very real difficulty for people. I had something like this, but it was about recording with Brendan, and we broke up 3 episodes away from the end of Breaking Bad. And so we never got to watch the finale together. And there was a feeling of just how incompleteness to that, you know? But anyway, so she has this moment seeing the Downton Abbey episodes listed of continuing to watch without him, and has a really cute memory of the two of them on the couch together and her saying to him, pay attention, this part's important. And he turns to her and goes, what? You watched this without me? That is a fundamental relationship rule. You wait before moving forward on your DVR. And it's just a very adorable, joking around. And I really loved it. It just felt like we don't get to see them just being together. It's always something over the top happening, you know? And there's something about that moment that made their relationship feel a lot more real to me than it has this whole season. And I wish that we got to see this sort of intimate moment more. But when we come back out of it and she's just crying and not really sure what to do, and Jane comes back in, and I was just like, God damn it, Jane, because look, I get wanting to be there for your mom, but there are times where you just need to cry alone. You just need to be by yourself and let yourself cry it out. And I really wanted Xiomara to be able to have that. She wants Jane to stay, but I just felt like it would have done her good, you know? But yeah, Jane forgot her phone and she sees that her mom was crying, and she winds up canceling on Rogelio, which he is disappointed by, but he doesn't get as upset as his assistant insists he should be. She basically is like, I can't believe this. How long are you going to be a second-class citizen? And when he's like, wait, what do you even mean? She kind of blurts this out and tries to pretend oh, I shouldn't have said that. But it's very obvious. She's trying to isolate him and put a wedge between him and his family. This is what people who are abusive and bad do, is they create this doubt. They assign these sinister motivations to people around you, and they make you feel like the only person in the world that you can trust is them. And it's really funny that she shows her hand as quickly as she did, because I kind of expected this to go on longer. And she has him locked up in the house and has revealed her identity by the end of the episode. And I just didn't think we were going to be doing that this fast. I'm kind of glad we do, because I was not looking forward to seeing her manipulating him this way. But I also do feel like maybe we could have let that be a little bit more of a slow burn, you know? But anyway, she says, this is a big night for you. That's all. I wish Jane turned up for you. And later on, he has a moment with Jane where he basically says, like, I understand that your mother was having a tough time and she's more important to you than me. And Jane is taken aback and he says, you chose her over me. And she says it was just because she was upset about the breakup. And he says, so was I. And tonight was a huge night for me. And you didn't show up. So the only Tiago related hashtag trending was hashtag Rolonleo. Which I believe. If it were anybody else, I wouldn't. But I believe it. And also, as much as I want to kind of assign him getting on her case here to the ideas his assistant put in his head, I kind of agree here too. I agreed with Petra and I see his point as well. Like, I understand that your mother was upset, but she actually believed the relationship was over in the first place and that they were just hooking up. He's the one who secretly thought they would get back together. He's the one that is having a worse, revelation after this breakup. And yeah, this is a big event and you're going to have him walk the carpet alone. I can't help it. I am on Rogelio's side here. It was one of those things where I was like, his assistant manipulating him sucks. But there was a part of me that was unexpectedly, oh wow, maybe the crazy woman has a point. And I don't know if that should be a sign that I'm in the wrong on this, but I'd be really interested to hear how you guys all feel about it. Because in the moment, I just kind of was like, well, what the hell? Oh my God, Rogelio, you're really letting her play you. You're being super unfair to Jane. And then when I took a step back, I was like, actually, he's not being unfair to Jane at all. This is him kind of just laying things out in a blunt way that is not his usual way. And so it feels more aggressive than it really should, because what he's saying here is just sort of factually correct. And he says, you made a choice, at least own it. And she says, I am really sorry, Dad. And he says, I think I just need some space right now. So she had been going to, go to the after party with him, but he goes without her. She saw the actual movie, but they don't spend any time together. So she's talking to her mother on the phone and tells her that, I sent this huge long-winded apology with a lot of emojis and says, I'm going to do what Dad said. I'm owning my choice. And this is when she goes and tells Raphael about Michael. And she says, yeah, the problem is that I am choosing him, and I am choosing him. Either accept it or don't. But if you don't, you're the one who is making it worse on our son, not me. And he says, I don't want to be replaced. Which actually hadn't even entered my mind. It does kind of make sense. Being replaced as her boyfriend was the only thing that I was thinking of. But she is going to be likely, I am guessing, getting married to Michael and living with him, with Matteo, in a whole situation that feels like family, that will make Raphael's presence a little weird. And I never really even thought about it in those terms. And I, when it was put in that context of his relationship with his child, I felt a lot more grace for him than I had before, and she insists you won't be. You're Matteo's dad. And he just says, yeah, I'll try, which is what he said before, but I don't know. So she leaves and she is standing by the elevator, texting. He said he'd try, and doesn't realize that Raphael is standing in the hallway watching her. And I kind of wondered if he was like looking at her text, like if she was going to text something that was sort of just going to make everything feel worse for him and he was going to be able to read it or something. I don't know what I thought, but he's just staring at her. And then he gets a text from Petra, doctor appointment tomorrow at 9. And he's looking at Jane as she gets on the elevator and disappears with tears in his eyes. And he just immediately goes over to Petra. And he says, "You asked me what to expect when the babies come, so here it goes. I will be there for all of it. I'll be the night nurse. I'll wake up every 3 hours. I will feed them. I will burp them." And he explains to her, this is what I wanted to do with Mateo and Jane, but I didn't get a chance to do it. I want to be the parent that's present. I'll install a door between our suites so that I can go back and forth. And she says, "Raphael, stop. What's going on?" And he says, "I want to be there with the babies and with you." And he takes her hand and says, "You're not a second-class citizen, and maybe I made a mistake." And I really thought this was going to be the moment, because I think she's still wearing a wedding ring here. And I know that she's married to fucking what's-his-face, but there was just something about the symbolism of it being that hand, you know? But yeah, he tries to go in for a kiss, and you see the moment. She is wanting this kiss so bad. Like, you see this desperate, oh God, if only this could really be true. And finally she stops, and like you see it click, and she realizes that there's something else at play, and instantly says, "What happened?" "Excuse me? I'm guessing Jane rejected you in some way, so now you're here?" And when he looks like, it's not even, he doesn't even try to deny it. He doesn't even get defensive. It's almost like he's looking at her like, "Are you fucking magic? Like, did you see the whole conversation? Like, how did you know?" Like, I almost feel like he's having a bit of a seeing himself clearly kind of moment, where you realize that your behavior has gotten so predictable that somebody could very reliably make this kind of call about what your motive is. And that can be a very jarring sort of experience, to realize that you can be read like that. But yeah, she says, "I'm not a second-class citizen, and I'm not a second choice either. You should go." And you can see it just frankly breaks her heart to kick him out, but she's doing the right fucking thing. So then we go to the bar. And this makes a lot of sense, actually, in a couple contexts. First of all, we have Louisa, who was having difficulty giving up Rose, and then Rose is taken from her, and so she goes to drinking again. And Raphael clearly has his own issues. He was out here partying and using sex, drugs, and alcohol as some sort of filler for his father's approval. He's got his own issues around all of this. So he's actually low-key doing exactly what Luis is doing. And he goes to the bar and he's drinking, and he sees this girl who's sitting there, very pretty. And I was like really wanting to be like, is this another person who's been set up to be here? I don't think she actually is. But after the last thing that happened with a woman that he met at his own bar, I feel like he'd be a lot more cautious probably. But he's not in his right mind right now. And she says, "Are you alone?" And he says, "Yeah, but I'm not planning on going home alone." And glances at his like little stool next to him. And I was just very, very deeply disappointed in him. I really was, you guys. Like, it's just sort of pitiful, you know? And I really do understand it. But like, this is the kind of thing that I would do after a breakup when I was like 20. You know, it's not, he's at his big age to like start to regress into the behaviors that he had when he was so like, what was that? Like 10 years earlier at this point? Like, dude, grow up, literally grow up. So this is the moment where Jane meets Michael at the pool. She's wearing this dress that really gives her a sort of like mermaid effect. And it's this really fun little transition between the two of them looking at each other from across the pool to then Jane being in this whole like synchronized swimming routine, because that's what they're rehearsing for the ad for the Marbella. And her getting like pulled up into the air by this ring is so weird. She looks down and Michael's like standing in the water underneath her. It's just very, very strange. But I really enjoy that they start making out, and eventually one of the women comes up to her and says, "Can you guys make out somewhere else? Because we're trying to rehearse." And they realize that they have just been in the way. The whole like squad of synchronized swimmers, dancers, is like lined up right next to them, and they did not even notice. And that was very funny to me. So, okay, this is the last scene where Rogelio winds up coming home, seeing this woman sitting on his couch in the dark. I love that he's like, "Oh, I thought it was some crazy person sitting there in the dark." Oh my God, dude. And she has a really wild look on her face. So, you know, I've taken care of all the security measures. I had new locks installed, and she says, "I had a new system put in," and she presses these numbers. I don't know what the numbers are, but I want to hazard a guess that it's his birthday. That's what I'm going to guess. I don't know. Maybe her own birthday. I think the key to all of this is going to be him figuring out the code, and that being how he gets out. Just a guess. I installed bars on all the windows so no one can ever get out. And he says, "You mean so no one can ever get in?" And she says, "No, that is not what I mean." And she comes towards him and calls him Rojo. And that's when he realizes there's only one person in the world who ever called me by that name, my old prison pen pal Lola. "So you remember me? But you couldn't be. She was in jail when you worked for J-Lo." Then the narrator says that's when he heard the scariest words of all. "I've never met J-Lo." And I could not help but giggle at that. That was a good line. Because they just emphasize so much how many times he has told literally everybody that. To the point where I was sort of surprised that he hadn't tweeted it and like tagged J-Lo and then had J-Lo tell him, "I don't know who that is." Like, you guys, J-Lo has been in the news too, because she evidently like is going to be dropping an album, which is wild because the past few years have been very hard on her in terms of everybody starting to really get clued in about how much music on her albums previous were like either straight up not her voice or her voice so heavily edited that she doesn't sound like herself at all. So the fact that she's even considering dropping an album, I just think is really weird. Like, this is just not the time. Everybody kind of knows that you're a fake. And I believe her when she says that she didn't know how much she was edited, but that doesn't make it any better that she is that deluded about what her voice sounds like, that she couldn't tell in the finished product. And then she decided that she was going to like have a series, like a world tour before the album dropped, and the fucking tickets aren't selling. So they're just canceling it. And she thought it was going to be this whole thing, and she can't fucking get asses in the seats because, one, everybody knows you're a fake at this point, and two, in this economy, you better be fucking for real if you are going to be selling tickets to anything, because nobody can afford jack right now. So get real, lady. So I do like feel a little bit bad for her, because it's like, that's embarrassing to like do a thing and then nobody even wants to come. And so you start having to cancel when you're a big enough name that it will be noticed that you're doing it this way. Like, that sucks. But also, I don't know who told you this is what the world wanted, but you need to fire that person. So, yeah, that is how the episode ends. And she's like approaching him. And I do not know what it is that she wants to do. Play house? Like, I'm assuming that she'll have control of his phone, or I don't know. You know, she's going to make it so that he can't contact anybody, of course. And I am just hoping that eventually security is going to start to realize, like, the fact that he didn't turn up and we had the security issue recently is going to be connected, and they're going to look in on him. We'll see. She may have, like, covered her tracks in such a way that it explains where he is. You know, that she's like, oh, I told all of them that you're going on this, like, spacation, and you'll be gone and in this, like, really exclusive resort where there's no Wi-Fi for 5 days. You know what I mean? Like, something like that. That sounds like her. Because she really does seem like a person who pays attention to details. So anyway, all right, I have to wrap this up. Thank you guys again so much for hanging out with me. I really hope that you enjoyed the episode, and I hope you're enjoying all the coverage. I really enjoy this show a lot myself, so it's been super fun. Thank you guys again, and until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.